I think probably a more likely scenario, rather than them having a true central bank digital currency, is they would likely use an intermediary. Like they would suggest that everybody in Canada must be a member or a client of RBC. And so everybody must have a bank account with RBC. And then, I think what they'd probably try to do is bribe people into getting these accounts with this one provider. And they'd say something like, you can only get your universal basic income in your central bank digital currency account or your RBC central bank digital currency account. And so I can see that definitely happening. It definitely failed from a social level so far, the central bank digital currency. But what if we go down the road and people are desperate? They're desperate to put a roof over their heads. They're desperate to put food on the table. They're desperate to heat and get to work and things like that. And they cry out to the politicians, we need something. And I think some slick politician will stick up their hand and say, I've got a solution for you. It's a central bank digital currency, except it's not called that. It's called the rainbow currency or something like that. And everybody will sign up for it out of necessity. And so that's a central bank digital currency. But I'm going to go into a couple of other things that are more concerning to me than that are actually in play today.
I'm so pleased to introduce you to Brett Oland, the CEO for the Bow Valley Credit Union in Alberta, as he joins us for our continued discussion about central bank digital currency. Brett has a Bachelor of Commerce from the University of Calgary and is a chartered accountant with expertise in corporate finance. He's served on the board of directors for the Credit Union Central of Alberta and chaired the board of directors for the Bow Valley Credit Union. He has 20 years experience working in the banking industry and has serious concerns about open banking, B15s, CBDCs, and the lack of banking stability in Canada. As an interesting aside, you might remember that the Bow Valley Credit Union did not close the accounts of members who supported the truckers' convoy. Tonight, we're so grateful that Brett can join us to share his extensive knowledge with us. Will you all please help me welcome Brett Oland. Brett, thank you for joining us and welcome to the Empower Hour.
Well, really appreciate you having me. Thank you very much.
Super. Thank you so much, Heather. Well, welcome, Brett. I have been wanting to have you on the show for quite a while now. So many Canadians are appreciative of the stand that Bow Valley Credit Union took. I know that you have been out there speaking and educating and advising people on the CBDCs and other issues, financial matters that are important to Canadians. So I'm really excited to have you on the show. A lot of people have become familiar with CBDCs. And I've got to admit, even with myself, I wasn't as familiar with the open banking or the B15 guidelines. And as I was going through researching it, I'm thinking, oh my goodness, this is definitely something that Canadians need to hear about. And then before I hand it over, I was just very excited that recently in the US, the House had voted against the CBDCs, although it does need to still go through the Senate. And then we've had word as well that the Swiss Central Bank just said it says no need for a retail CBDC as risks outweigh benefits, as well as 7 other countries, including Denmark and Ecuador, have canceled CBDC projects as well. So hopefully good sense is going to prevail, but we know that Trudeau and the Liberals and the NDP are just, they're just so committed to all of this tyranny, and hopefully this will be part of sinking their ship. So welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate you having me. Yeah, it's something of great concern that I have, and it seems that some countries around the world are coming to their senses around the possible implications of what this could be. And it's yet to be seen whether they're going to try and rebrand it as something different, because central bank digital currencies or CBDCs has such a terrible stigma attached to it. But I would not be surprised if they try and rebrand it and come out with something a little different format that trying to sell this to Canadians in general. So
I agree, and it'll all be on the safety and security of your finances and your investments. And I just experienced something where I've had fraud on my credit card, and I'm like, they can't even keep credit cards from, not being picked by some loser who wants to, make a few bucks. So this is not at all about safety and security of our finances. It's about government control. And so we'll just continue to shout that out to Canadians. Don't put all of your efforts onto your credit card. Use cash. Support businesses using cash as well. There's a couple of things when we had Rob Anders on the show recently as well, talking about steps that you can take, and that's available on one of our pages. And we'll make sure that that's available in the description below as well. So I think what I'd like to do is just hand it right over to you. And I'm looking forward to your presentation, and then we'll have a bit of Q&A. The show is live, so if anybody wants to actually ask Brett any questions, then you'll need to sign on to the Empower Hour. And Brett, it's actually, as I consider that, I mean, you're the president and CEO of the bank, of the credit union here in Canada. And I can't even imagine having the opportunity to sit down with the president and CEO of TD Bank or Bank of Montreal, to ask these questions from the inside. What are you guys thinking? And so we're definitely interested in hearing what you have to say. And so with that, just over to you.
So, yeah, I think, as mentioned, Rob, a few weeks back, Rob Anders did a great job of central bank digital currency and the conversation around that. And I encourage everybody to go take a look at that presentation that was a few weeks back. I'm going to get into a little bit more detail on a couple of concepts that I think are probably more problematic than a central bank digital currency. We'll just start first of all with if I can get my next slide. This is something I actually came across just on X. And for those of you that aren't great with reading like I am, I'll read it out to you. What if the bank runs out of money from the Monopoly game? Some players think that the bank will go bankrupt if it runs out of money. The bank never goes bankrupt. To continue playing, use slips of paper and keep track of each player's banking transactions until the bank has enough paper money to operate again. The banker may also issue new money on slips of ordinary paper. And I think this is a really just fantastic example of a board game that we likely all grew up with, and how currency is actually created. And it's the similar process that they're trying to do with the central bank digital currency, and with the fact that it's just much easier to create a central bank digital currency than it would be with a paper currency. So first of all, I mentioned that I'm concerned about a few more things other than central bank digital currencies, but I think it's important to understand exactly what a central bank digital currency is. So here's the current setup of the banking system. So you have the Central Bank of Canada, who usually calls the shots on rates and printing currency and that type of thing. And they are linked with the Treasury. And the Treasury, if you think of it, is the checking account of the government. And so it's distinct and separate, those two parts, from your financial institution. And when I say your financial institution, I mean all the major banks in Canada, all the major credit unions in Canada, RBC, BMO, TD, Bow Valley Credit Union, Service Credit Union here in Alberta, are all financial institutions. And the reason why there's a separation is because banking's been around for thousands of years. And there is a good reason that there is a separation between the checking account of the government of Canada, the central bank, and your financial institution. And I don't think it would be any surprise to people that these three groups have sort of gotten closer and closer together over the past number of years. And the reason why these aren't combined is really market forces free market forces don't allow them to be combined. And so if you think of something like Bow Valley Credit Union, I actually care about profit and loss of my organization. RBC CEO cares about the profit and loss of their organization. So they can't run around giving out what I call malinvestment to silly loans and things like that that have no financial return. Otherwise, if you have too many loans like that on your books, you're going to go bankrupt as an organization. So now I think it's safe to say that the current government doesn't care about printing money. So they don't care about things going bankrupt. And I think that's really prevalent in society today, where we were at the zero bound with interest rates, and when you start to see ridiculous programs come out all over the place. And, you know, one was just brought up in the introduction. SOGI 123 is a great example of a program that has no return on investment to society, similar to a number of these wind farms and solar farms. No real investment return. And so when you have the government basically propping up these programs and not allowed to fail, that is considered malinvestment, and it can only lead to very detrimental things in society. So when you think of a true central bank digital currency, it's rather than you dealing through the intermediary of a commercial bank or Bow Valley Credit Union or an RBC or a TD type thing, you directly go to the Central Bank of Canada. And so everybody in Canada would have a bank account with the central bank. And of course, we know the implications of something like that. They can turn off your account on a whim. They could put time limits on your currency. They could, tax you daily. They could put different credit scores around whether you've eaten too much red meat or emitted too much carbon. So I think we all can understand that that's a very big challenge if that's directly with the Central Bank of Canada. I think probably a more likely scenario, rather than them having a true central bank digital currency, is they would likely use an intermediary. Like they would suggest that everybody in Canada must be a member or a client of RBC. And so everybody must have a bank account with RBC. And then, I think what they'd probably try to do is bribe people into getting these accounts with this one provider. And they'd say something like, you can only get your universal basic income in your central bank digital currency account or your RBC central bank digital currency account. And so I can see that definitely happening. It definitely failed from a social level so far, the central bank digital currency. But what if we go down the road and people are desperate? They're desperate to put a roof over their heads. They're desperate to put food on the table. They're desperate to heat and get to work and things like that. And they cry out to the politicians, we need something. And I think some slick politician will stick up their hand and say, I've got a solution for you. It's a central bank digital currency, except it's not called that. It's called the rainbow currency or something like that. And everybody will sign up for it out of necessity. And so that's a central bank digital currency. But I'm going to go into a couple of other things that are more concerning to me than that are actually in play today. So the first being open banking. So again, we sort of have our current structure, and there is quite a distinct separation between the government of Canada, your financial institution, and third-party vendors. And the easiest way that I can describe open banking is if anybody's signed up for a new budgeting software or a new accounting software or some of these financial things that come out these days, usually one of the first things it wants to do is link to your existing financial institution. So what it does is say, I can make your life so much easier. Things are going to be more secure. Things are going to be more safe if I have direct access to your bank account. And so this third-party provider, if you allow it, you'll go in and you'll put in your password information and it'll grab information from your existing bank account. And so right now it uses a technology called screen scraping. And screen scraping isn't terribly effective right now. It can go grab amounts and maybe dates and that type of thing, but it's not very specific. Under something like open banking, they're basically putting that screen scraping on steroids. And so the federal government came out with a framework in the height of COVID. Of course, there's a lot of things that happened in the height of COVID that they slipped in, and they created a loose framework for open banking. And so on this open banking framework that they're proposing, not only just sort of screen scrapes, it can pinpoint accuracy, dates, times, what you're spending your information on, when you spent it on it, what store you went to. So it's a really comprehensive indication of what's going through your financial institution. And so not only, if you allow it, will it go out and grab it from your specific financial institution, but it'll also grab it from everywhere. It'll grab it from title agencies. It'll grab it from the CRA. It'll grab it from insurance companies. It'll grab it from wealth companies. It'll grab it from other financial institutions from you. And what it does is siphons all that information through a government agency and creates a complete financial picture of you as an individual. And so I don't know about you, but that doesn't sit very well with me. Open banking is something that Bow Valley Credit Union is not interested in. We're not even building the gateways for these institutions to get access to it. And we're legally allowed to do this. So what I encourage people to do is actually ask their financial institution what they're doing with open banking and what they intend to do with open banking. I think you'll find that the majority of financial institutions, especially the bigger ones, are subscribing to open banking. And some of you may have even already legitimately signed up for it. In the last couple of years, a number of agreements have come out from financial institutions, basically signing you on to the digital landscape of the financial institution. And basically what it suggests right within there is that they can make changes like sign you up for open banking without even needing your permission to be able to do that. So I think it's important for people to look into that. So secondly, the second thing that's more concerning to me than a central bank digital currency is OSFI's Climate Risk Mitigation Act, B15, and how it links to S243. And I'll get into detail what that is. Before I get there, I think it's important to know the distinction of OSFI-regulated financial institutions and other regulated financial institutions. So here in Alberta, we're regulated by the Credit Union Deposit Guarantee Corporation, or CUDG there, versus OSFI. So OSFI stands for the Office of Superintendent of Financial Institutions. So all the banks in Canada report and are regulated to OSFI. And just a little fun tidbit, the minister that OSFI reports to is Chrystia Freeland. So we don't have to report under these standards, but any financial institution that falls under OSFI does. So now, to these bills. B15 is a fairly benign document if you want to read about it. It is on the OSFI website, and it talks about greenhouse gas emissions. And of course, they're targeting greenhouse gas intensive industries. And so just to give you an indication of how detrimental this is going to be. So currently, Bow Valley Credit Union requires to create a loan for oil and gas. Just to create $1 in loan, we require 12.5 cents of capital. And so it's important to note that capital is very important to financial institutions. We can't operate without it. And so the more capital, the better. But every time we give out a loan, we basically eat up into our capital, and it makes us safe and secure organizations, the more capital that we have. So now, under these new guidelines, it links to, in B15, links to another bill, S243. And within S243, it gives new guidelines that you need for to give out these capital loans for these OSFI-regulated financial institutions. So with that same dollar of that you'd lend to oil and gas as a financial institution, rather than 12.5 cents, you'd need $1.56 for capital, or that would imply a 1,250% increase in capital. that would be required to give out that loan. And so this implies about a break-even point that we would have to charge, or an OSFI regulated institution would need to charge, of about 20%. If rates continue to rise, these oil and gas industries, sensitive industries, are going to be looking at 25, 30, 35% loans per annum that they're going to have to pay to basically get a loan from these financial institutions. Otherwise, the financial institution cannot break even and will not give that loan. And so what's probably even more concerning, if you go into the OSFI website, into the S243, it gives a list of industries that they're basically concerned about with greenhouse gases. And of course, you're going to see oil and gas industries on there. But then, probably to shock to some people, you're going to see agriculture in there. Anything that's food intensive is carbon emitting. Forestry is definitely going to be in there. Anything to do with mining. And probably the most concerning to me is they cited residential housing as a concern as well. So to me, if you follow this down the path, anybody that has perhaps an older home, maybe you only have single pane or double pane windows. Maybe you don't have enough insulation in your house. Maybe you don't have solar panels. Maybe you don't have geothermal heating. In that case, rather than paying the traditional 4, 5, 6% for a mortgage, you could be looking at 10, 15, 20% for your mortgage because you do not comply with their restrictions under this S243. So now it's important to note that, again, Bow Valley Credit Union does not need to follow these standards. So I think it's important that you go out and talk to some local credit unions in your area to see what they're doing around B15 and S243 and what the plan is. Because the thing is, this could be very detrimental to people if this comes enacted and an oil and gas company thinks things are going along very well, and then all of a sudden they get stuck with a 35% mortgage. And here's just a slide that I came across that was very interesting. And I think it's a great reminder that there's no such thing as a low energy rich country. And so basically, if we decide in Canada that we're going to take away all our sources of energy, we're going to end up a third world country. And there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And, you know, there's got to be some ever better solutions. I don't propose that we go off of oil and gas anytime in the future. But if you are concerned about carbon within the atmosphere, there's better solutions than kneecapping oil and gas. We need to start looking at geothermal. We need to start looking at nuclear if these are the roads that you want to go down. But unfortunately, the government basically just wants to kneecap the oil and gas industry with no alternative, which will put Canada in the poorhouse. So now, why are they doing all these things? I think it's important to try and understand what is actually happening here. And we came across this when I was doing a number of hours of research about 3 years ago, and saw what the central banks were doing around the world, basically giving out free currency and doling it out to people in society throughout COVID. This, of course, was massively inflationary. I don't think it's any surprise to people that they see their grocery prices skyrocketing. They see housing prices skyrocketing, automobiles and cars skyrocketing in prices, rental units skyrocketing prices. This is all the result of basically the central banks around the world monetizing the debt that the government basically tried or was successful in creating and spent into the economy during COVID. And so this is not new. It's been around for quite some time, and I think it's just at significantly elevated levels right now. And so here's a great chart from when Nixon removed the U.S. off the gold standard. And as you can see, the productivity of people in society continued to improve, but the hourly compensation that people received continued to just stay flat, maybe a little bit up. And so it's no wonder that people are constantly struggling in society today. Way back when, like in the 70s, one person working outside of the home would be enough to support a family and have a house and to be able to afford 2 cars. And then it slowly graduated into 2 people outside of the home. And then it slowly turned into, oh, I need a side gig to make things ends meet. And so, and now we're at a point where families realistically need to think about stacking on one on top of each other, where multiple families are living in one household, because the cost of living has gone up so significantly and the hourly compensation hasn't kept up to be able to compensate for it. Here's another great slide that I came across, and it's of M2. And if you think of M2, it's basically just the money that's in the real economy. And so as you can see, it sort of tails off at the end there and spikes after 2020 when they decided to give out all those stimulation checks. And so this is basically currency printing at its finest. The government comes up with a program and then spends it into the real economy. And it's no wonder on this next slide here that we see the consumer price index skyrocketing, as well as that M2 money supply. So now this hasn't been in a problem up until about now. So we've had pretty much a lot of currency printing for about the past 15 years since the great financial crisis in 2008. And it really hasn't been a problem until now. So now what we're seeing is the central banks and these governments really in a rock and a hard place of where their interest on their debt is basically skyrocketed. In the US, it's about 1/4 of all tax receipts received goes to service the debt. And the thing is, inflation is not yet under control, not in the US and not in Canada. And I'm of the view that they're going to have to increase interest rates to get this inflation under control rather than decrease them. That seems to be the general narrative that's out there, which means that even more money is going to have to go into interest payments. And in Canada, it's so bad that when this budget came out in this March of 2024, not only did we spend, we plan on spending more than we actually bring in tax revenue, but on top of that, they're adding debt of $250 billion. And so when you get into this position where you actually have to print currency to pay for your debt, it's called fiscal dominance. And it might not be as quick to be as inflationary as sending out a bunch of stimmy checks to everybody across Canada. It does gradually get its way out into the real economy. All those interest debts is owned by somebody and they spend it somewhere. And I think that inflation is going to continue for the foreseeable future. And so here's another final slide that's really great that sort of highlights this exact thing that was happening. So in 2008, basically what happened was that the governments printed all this currency, but it was actually just captured within the banking sector and never actually made it out into the real economy. But as you can see on the far right there on the slide, not only did they print the currency, but they also got it out to the real economy. And it's no wonder that we've seen such amount of inflation. And I expect that to continue for years to come. I think we'll look back in the 2030s and go, wow, that was a very inflationary decade. So it's also very important to note of not necessarily listening to what central banks say, but what do central banks do? And so around the world, typically gold has been the reserve asset for governments around the world. And over the last 100 or so years, we have gradually declined in the value of reserves that we've actually held. But I think it's really important to note what's happened in the last couple of years. Those reserves have started to move upwards, and that's largely a result of governments around the world not trusting the system anymore. So you think China, you think India, you think Russia, you think South America, you think Brazil, all have lost faith that in the US dollar because they continue to print it year after year and it just gets devalued year after year. And so they are shoring up their reserves of gold within their balance sheets. And so what we're trying to do as an organization is basically we propose the same thing. So Bow Valley Credit Union is actually using the profits from our organization to purchase gold and silver to put on our balance sheet. Do what they do, not what they say. We're also looking at other hard assets, such as Bitcoin, to be able to do something like that. But we want to be able to cater to our membership as well, not just protect our members within our organization, but also to help people get prepared for what we think is going to be a massively inflationary decade. And so within Bow Valley Credit Union, we have our partner Silver Gold Bull that we get wholesale pricing from, and you can go through Bow Valley Credit Union's website and get that same discount to purchase physical gold and silver for yourself. We also have storage solutions, and we recently launched a program where you can actually borrow against your gold and silver. So basically, you have $10,000 in gold and silver. Oops, your furnace blows up. You can actually borrow against your gold and silver, get fiat currency and pay for that solution, but you actually retain your gold and silver. And it works more like a home equity line of credit where you can actually take a loan of your gold and silver. We're also working on a program where it moves directly from a store of value to actually a medium exchange. And let me explain that just a little bit better. Because we see all this devaluation of the currency happening in the world today, we want to be able to give people access to a stable store of value. That in this case being gold or silver, that's your core asset that you want to be able to use. But it's very difficult to spend gold and silver today into the real economy. So we're coming up with the solution to basically move directly from that store of value to buy that cup of coffee through your debit card or your credit card. So we're working on that program. Should be up and running about in the 3 months. So a couple other things here. As mentioned there, we were very opposed to freezing accounts during the trucker convoy, as well as we did not force any of our staff to get vaccinated during the COVID pandemic, which was very different from any OSFI-regulated financial institution in Canada forced their staff to get vaccinated. That included RBC, TD, anybody that follows those guidelines here in Alberta, even ATB, forced their staff to get vaccinated. We weren't going down that road. We are here to provide a financial service to people. We are not here to dictate health status to people. So anyway, these are just some couple of things that we're doing as an organization, and I encourage you to look into other credit unions, perhaps in your province, about what we could accomplish in various credit unions. I think it's important that the time for action is now. Some of these things, like central bank digital currencies, may have gone away for a bit of time frame, but they'll come back. And with things like open banking and B15, they don't need a central bank digital currency to basically control the narrative that they want and push people into a direction that they want. And so now, just finally wrapping up, this was a really interesting letter that's hanging on our wall in our first branch in Banff from 1953. And it's basically the go-ahead, the green light that we were allowed to start our credit union. And so an interesting story, in Quebec way back when, the English-speaking people controlled the banking sector. And they didn't give any access to the French-speaking people to the banking services. And so what the French-speaking people did is basically said, to heck with you, we're coming up with our own financial institution. So now today, that cooperative, that credit union, has 6.5 million members, has its own act, and has significant political sway. And that act is called the Desjardins Act, and that's around today. And that's because they came together as individuals within their province and wanted change. They wanted something different. They wanted something unique to their services. And that's what we're trying to create within Bow Valley Credit Union across Alberta. Happy to answer any questions that you may have, and we can take it from here. Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Super. Thank you, Brett. You've put that nicely into layman terms, so I think everybody could clearly understand, how complicated the financial situation is in Canada. I say complicated, but it's really quite simple, right? They're messing around with people's money. They're overstepping and getting into an area that the banking system should have stayed out of. And I compare it right now as I'm thinking it's so invasive, knowing that they are watching all of our spending, no matter where we go, what we spend our money on. And, now we walk around our cities as well, and there's surveillance cameras everywhere. It's the same thing, but just in a different area of our lives. And if we don't like it, then we need to really take those simple steps not to comply. And again, that would be using cash, taking your money out of the main banks. I think they're really quite concerned about that. The big banks, as people were doing those bank runs and removing funds, there was a period of time. And I think when Trudeau was overstepping, the banks were probably going, holy smokes, what are you doing? We're not ready yet, you goof, right? And so I don't know that it was just a matter of the Senate overturning his response towards the truckers, but I would imagine the banks were probably pretty afraid at that time too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's some estimates that within that week, $35 to $50 billion exited Canada. And basically it was people that put capital into the country and said, no more. I'm getting my money out of there. I'm done with you. And so I don't know how much of that has actually come back, but that it was 1 week that the implications of something like that happened. And you're absolutely right. I sort of put people in two different categories. It's hard not to sort of categorize people these days. There's the people that think they're in charge and try and rule the world, and the people that know they're not in charge and the man upstairs is actually in charge. And I think it's a very important distinction that it's constant example after example after example of these people trying to micromanage people's lives. And a big one is finances and currency. And to be able to control that is a big step forward for them. So.
Yeah, right. You just don't mess with people's money. I mean, you don't mess with their kids and you don't mess with their finances. And we have that power. We've seen it down in the States against Target and other businesses that decided to go all woke and think they could push their agenda on the population. But we have that buying power, we have that investing power, and so you have to be smart about that. You mentioned that the services, your dream. I mean, the Bow Valley Credit Union. I know that everybody is asking, is there one in my province, and how do I go about this? So I want to ask you, I experienced something here where someone had gone to a credit union, and because of all of the ordeal with the truckers convoy and money being pulled out, they had to go through a very rigorous risk assessment, and they were denied by this local credit union to invest their money or even open up an account. What do you have to say about that? So do the credit unions depend on who the board and the directors are?
Yeah, it's definitely something to it. And, we hear stories just about weekly of people continuing to get debanked, where they'll show up with a letter that says something like, you're outside of our risk profile, get your affairs cleaned up within 30 days, you're done. Today, we see that type of thing, which is really unfortunate. It does have a big indication what we've done. We've worked on this for the better part of 3 or 4 years. We had to get the right people in place. We had to get the right board. in place. What was really baffling to us during the trucker convoy is almost immediately when Christina Freeland stood up at the podium, is financial institutions and ATB in Alberta started freezing people's accounts. And you can't tell me that that wasn't preemptive, that within hours they start freezing people's accounts. And what was really surprising is we didn't receive one letter, one email, one phone call regarding to do this. And so it's just really troubling that they've gotten these bigger financial institutions within their pocket. So we are sort of a few and far between organization for sure. There are a few anomalies, and what I would do is just ask around and see what some credit unions' responses were to COVID and the trucker convoy and that type of thing. That's the best advice I can give if you're outside of Alberta and unfortunately can't join Bow Valley Credit Union. It's a really tough scenario to be in, but I think there is some progress being made, and people gradually are getting more emboldened to tackle some of these issues right within the credit union and have had enough.
I think that if people came together within their communities, we've got over 100 chapters across Canada, and we're trying to build these communities because that's the globalists say that, within the communities, it's the mayor and city council who are closest to the people who can bring about the greatest amount of change. But those communities outnumber the globalists within there and the few people that are going along with it. And if you applied enough pressure to a local credit union and provided them your business, I think that they would enjoy that business to the point where they'd more likely listen to the people. But this whole thing that had transpired with the banks, I mean, the big five banks, there's obviously collaboration there with the government as well. And I think it was FinTrack that was developed, wasn't it, after 9/11? And it was all about terrorism again. And they implement this so that to protect people's financing and to make sure that if there's any terrorist activity, they can shut it down. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking about in Sweden and Switzerland right now, they're actually closing down mosques because of terrorists that are running them and they're terrorist cells. And they're saying, you know what, you can sell your assets and get out. And here we're not even able to open a bank account because of this little risk assessment. And as average Canadians, we pose no threat or risk. And so it's really quite shocking when you compare the two, if you consider it that way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And again, after the Twin Towers went down, it was about our safety and security around that. I saw a question popped up there. It was through FinTrack that this order came out. So now if we did get an order from FinTrack to freeze somebody's account down, we would have to abide by it. But the thing is, it doesn't mean that we're not going to push back. And in this case, it was completely unfounded. And if we were able to just drag our feet for that week, people would have been okay and not frozen out of their accounts and that type of thing, just because it did not last very long, this Emergencies Act, and was ultimately proven unconstitutional in the courts. So
right. Yeah, and it wasn't even officially passed. It was never officially passed at the federal level, these premiers. And we should not forget the premiers that are out there doing great things for parents right now. They buckled down and they were tyrants during this time. They didn't help anybody out. Every single one of them are sitting in office right now. So I'm not giving them a pass, but definitely, more needs to be done to protect ourselves from this in the future. Now, somebody had made a comment here. I think it was Mike. Okay. No, that's not the one. Where was it? Okay, yeah, Mike, I've worked with and for Canadian credit unions for over 35 years and have witnessed virtually every credit union across the country, as well as the provincial central credit unions and regulators, become captured by those who push a specific ideology. Brett, he says, how have you managed to escape this stranglehold on the credit union system?
Yeah, no, it's definitely a challenge because I agree that some of these organizations are captured. A big part of it is management in place, and so the management is put in place by the CEO, and the CEO is put in place by the board. But the good news is, as a member of a credit union, you can go on the board. And so basically what we had to do is get all the bad actors out and put in the good actors on the board, and be able to basically get an uninterrupted view of the organization and instill management in place. And basically what it did is hardened the organization. And so once the general public starts to see what you're doing as an organization, they come flocking. And so people with the same value set that we have, freedom, liberty, entrepreneurial spirit, have come flocking to our organization, and it hardens the organization, and they show up to AGMs and they vote in the right people. So it's a long process, but at the end of the day, it is possible. So.
Right. Yeah. And people have nothing to complain about if they're not willing to invest some time. And that's not just in the banking system. It's regarding PACs, for parents and being on as school board trustees and in elected positions. I mean, we've really got to take a big, huge step forward and become actively involved. Okay, so I'll go through a few of these questions. I saw and noticed that by June of 2025, the banks will no longer be valid and non-operational, some kind of contractual thing. Any knowledge of that? Will that affect you and other credit unions?
So it's right within the Bank Act, and basically the bank back in, I think, 1880 first started the Bank Act. And originally when it was created, basically they put on the charter that they would expire after 10 years. And so it forced the government and the Senate to basically review the Bank Act every year. And so it's nothing new that there's an expiry on the actual bank charters. And what they did do is they moved it from 10 years to 5 years. And most recently, I think it was in 2023, they were supposed to review the Bank Act. But what happened is, if governments get distracted by rainbow sidewalks and SOGI and other things like that, they don't have time to look at such low-level stuff like Bank Acts. So what they did is they basically just punted it out a couple of years. My expectation is that they'll come closer to that June 2025 deadline and move it out further. I know I might be out on an island on my thinking there, but banking is very complicated. For the actual government to take it on within a couple of years, getting the process and systems in place, I just don't think it's possible. So
okay. Good. Yeah. And the more that people are pushing back against these systems as well, even if they do have these nefarious plans, they're going to have to think twice about it. Even I never understand. I know they're wanting to go towards a socialist system where everybody receives an income a month, whether it's $2,000, et cetera. But then you don't have people making the taxes and paying for all of this. And so are they going to continually to print their magical monopoly money or pick it off the trees in Justin Trudeau's backyard? I don't know. It just makes socialism makes no sense to me. It's not my choice.
No, and the thing is, I'm a bit of a history buff, and socialism has killed more people than any other political structure under the sun. And so it blows my mind that especially the youth today seem to be subscribing to this. But history repeats itself. In a lot of these circumstances that we saw, that communist countries voted in cheering these governments because they were so desperate for change. And I think it's important for education that we've gone down this road before. Socialism does not work. It's not perfect. Capitalism is the best system that we have. And I would even suggest today, we're not living in capitalism. This is a crony capitalism. There's way too much government intervention for this to be true capitalism. And usually it's the first talking point is like, see, capitalism didn't work. We have to find a better solution. This is not capitalism. This is crony capitalism.
No, they're undermining capitalism to try to demonize it and then say socialism is the way. But socialism is never meant to work. It is meant to give power to tyrants. And that's the only thing. And then they're taking our kids through the education system. They're indoctrinating them. They're grooming them into this way of thinking that they're victims. And so then, they graduate. And unfortunately, many kids, they don't feel like they can aspire to what we could be doing with them previously, like in the era that I was brought up, and the input from my community and my family, and to be able to achieve. And so when you put kids under, this type of pressure and these social justice things, they're not thinking about banking. They're not thinking about what they're going to do as a profession and providing for their family and being a responsible part of community. They're thinking more about being victims and the handouts that come with that. And anyways, we've got work to do there, and we are. So I'll get back to some of these questions. I know that people would probably really want to know, can if you're in another province, can you get an account in Bow Valley?
Unfortunately, you need to be a resident of Alberta to be able to be a member of Bow Valley Credit Union. If you're really wanting to do it, there's a couple of options. If you have a friend or family member within Alberta that resides in Alberta, you can basically get a co-account opened up with them, and basically Bob's your uncle from there. Or it's a more complicated route. You can actually create a corporation within Alberta, but then there's a lot of sort of paperwork and bells and whistles behind that. We are looking at options of how we can expand beyond our provincial borders, but we're a little ways off from being able to do that.
Well, I think there's
is just to seek out credit unions like ours in your individual provinces.
Yeah, and get on the boards. But there's a lot of interest in this, Brett. There's a lot of desperate Canadians who want to get out from under the thumb of the 5 big banks and make this work. So you're giving us good information today on how to do that. Hopefully a lot of people will hear this message and then start signing up to become directors, have family and friends. And I guess, yeah, if you're in another province and you have a family member, you've got to make sure you trust them, right? You're going to have signing authority on your account. Yeah.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it doesn't have to be in perpetuity either. It's just basically for the sign-up period, and then you can live outside a province and be a member without that resident being in Alberta.
Yeah, and how would that work for checks? Like if you have a check to cash, how do you get it to deposit it? If you're in a different province.
Check deposit, so you can just even use your cell phone. Our ATM network is across Canada as well, and basically it links directly into our banking system. If you pop in your Bow Valley Credit Union debit card, any ATM across Canada, you can make deposits or do transactions, pay bills, that type of thing. Phone, email, our app, our website are quite functional. You can do just about anything without being at a branch. So.
Okay. All right. That's good information to know. Okay. So I'm sorry, I'm trying to sift through these now. Some of them are repeats. Can you help the provinces start a similar credit union, drafting constitutions? Has there been any credit unions to reach out to you from other provinces and ask for assistance or advice?
There has been. I'm probably not in a position to be able to speak to them yet because they may not want to go public with something like this. My hope is to actually get to a point where I can create basically a documentation model and hand it to a credit union in a different province and go, here, this is what we did. But of course, that takes a willing management, a willing board to be able to sort of implement that strategic plan as well. I've had a lot of people come to me and say, well, how do I start our own credit union? And unfortunately, the financial hurdle is pretty significant. Even for a very rudimentary credit union, you're likely going to need about 10 million in capital. And that's why we've been so wildly popular in Alberta. It's people first go to how do we build our own credit union? Next, they figure out, wow, that's a lot of capital and intensive work. Why don't we just open up a branch within our community?
So do you have multiple branches throughout Alberta?
We do. Our first one is in Banff, as mentioned. Canmore, our head office is in Cochrane. We have 2 in Airdrie, 1 in Calgary, and a recent branch that we opened just at the beginning of May in Atchison, which is just west of Edmonton. So we have 7.
All right. And I know people are asking from their provinces, can you recommend a credit union? And so I think that would be very difficult for you to do at this point. And I think the best advice you've given is go in and see where the branch stands on some of the critical issues.
Yeah. And I do have sort of a bit of a line of sight to a Saskatchewan one and an Ontario one, but I can't really in good confidence release that information until they're ready to sort of go down that road. So
okay, well, maybe this will be another show and we could announce credit unions, give people more direction. I really do. I really see this as the way for the future as people want to move away from the banking system. I love the fact that you're backed by silver and gold. It's the smartest thing to do and brings stability to the, if I'm not mistaken, to the cash that people actually are holding in their hands through your banking system. Is that, or their investment? Sorry.
Yeah, and that's the hope. And I'm not a doomsdayer. I think of gold and silver more of an insurance policy, and it's basically just there in extreme situations like we seem to be living through today. It's not designed to be backed one for one, dollar for dollar of the organization. You don't need to do that. A little can go a long way. And that's what we're doing within our organization and encouraging people to take a bit of their savings, put it into gold and silver, some of these hard assets, to be able to really prevent these significant swings in the devaluation of currency from impacting you. So.
Okay, and where the gold and silver is stored, because I know there was the bank bail-ins many years ago. I wrote about it and I was trying to warn people because they snuck it into the finance or the, what was the document that was put in the, do you recall the bank bail-ins? It became one of the financial agreements budget into the budget. And
I think it was in 2014. I was really surprised when Harper actually did put this in. Whatever act it came into. And so a bail-in, for those unfamiliar, basically if you have any deposits in the banks over $100,000, they're at risk. And if say TD failed or something like that, then any dollar over that $100,000 limit would basically get converted into some type of share of TD Bank. Wow, thanks for that. You get a share of a failing bank instead of your actual deposits. I don't see the likelihood of that transpiring. I think the likelihood of a bank failure in Canada is quite low. But there is a big difference between a nominal failure and a real failure. So basically what the government is right now is on a real basis insolvent. And so what they do is they print currency on a nominal basis. And so that's why we see the economy not collapsing and things like that, and prices of housing not going down significantly, or the stock market not going down, is because they printed so many nominal dollars that it's propping up the system. But on a real basis, your actual purchasing power has significantly declined. And that's what happens when you increase the dollar supply by 40% in 3 years.
Right. And I know you were talking, when we're talking bank bail-ins, I mean, was it Greece? We look at what happened when the whole banking system collapsed. And that was the real concern. We don't know if that's the direction the government is doing to agitate the system enough to switch. I don't trust the government. I find it very concerning. And then many times I've heard that the CDIC, which is the Canadian Deposit Insurance, that they would never have enough money if people had $100,000 across the country. They don't have enough money in the pot to even pay everybody. So it isn't necessarily the best thing to have, that kind of money invested in the banks. Would you agree or disagree?
Well, I agree. Even with our insurance, the Credit Union Deposit Guarantee Corporation, it's only about a 1.5% that's actually stored somewhere. I think, again, though, the risk is likely low. If there was a failure, what would happen is the Bank of Canada would step in and print to high heaven. And so that $100 that you have in your account, you'd get it back. But the thing is, it doesn't do you much good if inflation really kicks in. And if TD went broke, that's $1.2 trillion that they'd actually have to print. So that would make inflation just go through the roof. So that $100, it would still be yours, but doesn't do you much good if a loaf of bread costs $100.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, those type of things are concerning. And if you have a safety deposit box and you have things in a bank bail-in, they can take those items as well. But tell me, what if you have gold and silver, but it's not in a bank? It is stored in, I don't even know where they store it, those type of things separately. Can the government, if there was a bail-in or something happened, can the government touch those facilities?
Well, there is precedent in the U.S. in the 30s. They actually did make a law outlawing Americans owning gold. So there is precedent there. It was largely toothless, this mandate. So basically what they said, they basically gave the carrot approach and said at the time gold was worth about $20 an ounce. And they were paying people $35 an ounce to get it. So a lot of people just said, hey, that's a great increase in value. I'm going to cash it in. If they ever do something like that, I'm going to dig a deeper hole in my backyard and keep that in place. Although I do have access to bank accounts and security deposits, so that's usually where I keep mine. I'll put it deeper in the vault.
Good. Because if anybody finds out your address right now, you just gave it away, right? They're going to be digging you're going to wake up one morning, your backyard's going to be dug up. It's going to be the Wild West, man.
Yeah, no, I have access to our vaults, so I put it there. But anyway, okay. Yeah, for sure. And so there is a confiscation risk that's out there, and I don't think it's any greater than any other risk. I think probably a more likely scenario in Canada is we have a whole lot of gold mines in Canada. And what they do is either take them over and basically run the mines as a crown corporation or something like that and get the gold that way. Or an even more likely scenario is they just put a royalty tax on it. So for every ounce of gold, they would take a gram or something like that. And that's how they'd sort of reshore their stores of gold, and that would be much simpler than trying to go door to door, trying to collect gold and silver from people. And even still, they don't have a right to it unless it's Royal Canadian minted bullion. You could be a jewelry dealer and make jewelry. So if that ever is enacted, I could see a whole bunch of jewelry producers just come out magically. Oh no, I make jewelry for a living. So,
right. So not the mint. Okay. So, yeah, that's really interesting. I sometimes walk around and I say, I hate them so much. They're so criminal. We're to expose evil and we to hate evil. We're to pray for our enemies. I know that, but man, is it hard sometimes when you realize what crooks these guys are. Okay. So a couple more questions. I know people are asking, is it better to take my cash out of a regular bank and put it into a credit union? And is the risk less in a credit union? But I kind of feel like we may have covered that already, depending on the way the credit union is going to do business.
Yeah, and it's important to note, don't be hyperbolic with this type of thing. Don't take all your money out and put it under your mattress. That's being a little impractical, I think. But I think it is important to do a little research. Do a little research on your financial institution. And I'm always surprised that people do more researching a television than they do their financial institution where their savings are for their nest egg. So ask the tough questions. What did you do during COVID? What did you do during the truck convoy? Are you planning on implementing open banking? What do you think of central bank digital currencies? Like, as we sort of talked about at the beginning of the show, good luck in getting somebody in TD that knows the answer to these questions. But that sort of is a statement in itself. So, in general, credit unions are for the people, and they listen to their members of the people, and therefore you have a voice there. And if you want change, you can ring it up the flagpole a lot easier than you can with a large Schedule I bank. So.
Okay. There was some questions from the last time when Rob was on. A couple of people had asked, what do you think will happen to RSPs down the road? I 30 years, 40 years ago, investing in an RSP, I look back now and I kind of see this as a big ripoff because people are trying to get their money out now, very concerned about it being in the hands of the government and really stuck. The better investment would have been gold or silver. I want to say or in property, but we know that the globalists are going after our property as well. So what do you have to say about those type of things? And can people transfer them from a regular bank to a credit union?
Yeah, absolutely. You can transfer your RSPs, and it's you don't take a tax hit to be able to do that. And you can actually transfer it even into physical silver and gold, and we can help you do that. It doesn't matter what province you're in, we can help you do that. And so you can have registered physical gold and silver from your retirement. And regarding what the government's going to do with it, they're sitting on a jackpot right now. These baby boomers have started retirement. They're forced to take their savings out of their registered products, and basically they're going to be raking it in over the next number of years with all the tax regarding this RSP money. Once it's registered, there's no real good way to get it out without sort of following tax law, unfortunately.
Okay.
But there are better ways to do it. What I'd recommend is actually talking to a tax accountant. It may sound expensive to start with, but a couple $1,000s will go a long way if you're paying tens of thousands of dollars in tax, or $10,000s less in tax.
Mm-hmm. So, in transferring from RSPs to gold or silver back, you mean?
Yeah, so you go right into physical bullion. So our partner Silver Gold Bull has like an RSP, TFSA, RESP, all registered programs where you can actually just transfer it in and use it to purchase gold and silver. You have to store it with Silver Gold Bull. But it is that option if you're concerned about the stock market or the devaluation of currency. It should hold up better over the coming decades. So
okay, that's really good information. I know that there was one person, elderly individual, who is already on old age security and CPP, and said, if I can get an account in a credit union, but my total income is government CPP and OAS, will that protect me, or am I helpless regarding income due to me being government funded? So I was just asking that question on behalf. The banks don't have any control over CPP and OAS, and if they wanted to eventually say you have to be jabbed to receive your CPP or OAS, God forbid, it comes to that, that's dealing directly with the government and has nothing to do with the banking system. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is correct. The good news is, in that case, is old age security and CPP are indexed to inflation. The bad news is the government is basically like the fox guarding the hen house. So it's the government reporting the the consumer price index, so the actual inflation measure. So they have an inherent bias to keep it lower. So because if they were actually to report the actual consumer price index, so the actual inflation of 8, 9, 10%, then they would have to actually index the CPP and OAS to increase each year by that amount. Of course, they're not doing that. They're saying inflation's at 2, 3%, and so they don't have to increase it. So yet another way they're sort of being quite shady. That's a bit of a tough one. I would hope that they don't go down that road of you need to be jabbed to get your CPP and OAS. That would be something else. That even the Trudeau government didn't step across that line. So
yeah, we wouldn't put anything past them. But at that point, well, Brett, thank you so much for the incredible presentation and taking the time to answer all of these questions. I'm sure more will pop up. And we'll have to have either you or Rob back on the show again. I would welcome you that if there is any further presentation you're doing or anything that will be breaking news or that we should be advising or warning Canadians about, I'd love for you to give me a call and to have you back on the show again. So is there any final words, advice, anything that you would like to tell our viewers?
Yeah, happy to help. Really appreciate you having me on the show. I think it's important to stress, don't be hyperbolic with this type of thing. Don't put every red cent into gold or silver and that type of thing. A little will go a long way. And it's a bit of a long road to finding a financial institution that you trust in and agree with their value set, but they are out there, and I just encourage people to keep on hunting for them. So
excellent advice and information. All right, well, thank you so much, and we look forward to having you on someday again. All right, thanks so much. Take care.
Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Brett. Okay, well, I think that was absolutely amazing. We will have this interview available tomorrow. We'll be uploading it to our Rumble page, and we're going to ask to help us out, help Canadians out, help out friends, family, and coworkers, and share this valuable information with them. If you value the work of Action for Canada, please donate. I am appealing to you to become a monthly donor. It is taking a lot to keep this organization going. We need the financial help. There's so much more that we want to do. I've appealed to you numerous times that I am in meetings with dignitaries, with people who are as concerned as us from other countries, making arrangements and resolving some certain issues that are threats to Canadians. And so we need your support. We can't be in the battle without your support. So please donate, one-time donation, but I would really love it if you would become, please, a monthly donor to Action for Canada. Okay, so I am going to go to next week's guest. It is going to be none other. We haven't had him on quite a while. It's going to be Dr. Stephen Malthouse, but we're not going to be necessarily talking about COVID-19 injections and harms and things around that nature. It is revolving around COVID-19, as well as expanding to the global agenda, including the 15-minute city attack, etc. But we're going to be talking about these killing the bills that are killing our freedom, and it would be Bill 31, Bill 36, why we have 4,000 health professionals in BC that are ready to work, and the BC tyrannical David Eby and Bonnie Henry. Oh my goodness, I can't wait till these people, I pray to God that they're going to end up in jail one day because of how nefarious it is what they're doing. But anyways, those bills were designed by this government that are keeping good people from working, and as well going into the future will stop doctors from, according to their oath, what they've sworn is to first do no harm. And when they know that people are being injected with deadly vaccines or children with the immunizations, they have a duty to stand up. And these bills squelch that. It just silences them. Then there will be Bill 44, 46, and 47. That's going to go into what's happening with the rezoning in cities. So it's going to be a great show, because what's happening in BC, other than Bill 31 and Bill 36, but these other bills are happening across Canada, and they're all tied into the land grabs in the 15-minute cities, UNDRIP, the UN Agenda 2030. So please make sure to join us next week. It's going to be another fantastic show. All right, finishing off, I'm going to read from Deuteronomy 23:19-20. And I want, I know I just finished talking a whole lot about Islam, but this has to do with the Empower Hour tonight with Brett Oland when we talked about CBDCs and banking. So the Bible says, we were talking about interest and different things like that as well. So the Bible says, you shall not charge interest to your countrymen. Shall we send this in a memo to Trudeau and the Liberals? So interest on any money, food, or anything that may be loaned at interest. You may charge interest to a foreigner, but to your countrymen you shall not charge interest, so that the Lord your God may bless you in all that you undertake in the land which you are about to enter to possess. And so since Canada is based on biblical principles, I would like to, for the government to get this into place. That means that immigrants, instead of all of our handouts and robbing us blind, they would actually have to pay interest on loans and the privilege of living in Canada. All right, and the final verse tonight is from Psalm 27:2-3. I just love this one, and I think that it's important that people know. It says, when evil people come to devour me, when my enemies and foes attack me, they will stumble and fall. Though a mighty army surrounds me, my heart will not be afraid. Even if I'm attacked, I will remain confident. And after all the heavy topics we've talked about tonight, it's good to embrace this psalm and know that the Lord is with us. He doesn't call us up to handle these types of missions without equipping us. And so I'm just so grateful and faithful to the Lord, and that He is the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father but through Him. So for all of you that may be unbelievers, may be from a different religion who are going to hear this, there may be things that are niggling within your spirit to say, yeah, my religion is maybe empty, or it is violent. I agree with you. And Christianity has always come in to help the widow and the orphan and the oppressed. And, we created schools and we created hospitals, and we were all and have been all about caring. And then the world has come in and they've polluted that. But Christianity, when a nation is fully believing in the Lord and our policies reflect that, there is life, and there is peace, and there is freedom. And I just want Canada to return to such a time as that and to honor the Lord. He deserves our worship. All right. So thank you so much for joining us tonight. God bless you, and God bless Canada.
Today's episode was sponsored by Galatians 5:1 Freedom Coffee. Galatians 5:1 is the first freedom-fighting coffee company focused on bringing unity back into community by bridging the divide with gourmet coffee. It goes beyond fueling the fight for freedom. Action for Canada receives 10% of all coffee sales made. Galatians 5:1 offer a wide selection of coffee products. Go to Galatians51freedom.coffee to choose your own personal coffee experience made just for you.
with virtuous hearts will pursue it. You have a virtuous heart if you are here today pursuing freedom and righteousness. And then verse 23 comes along with a promise. God says he will turn the sins of evil people back on them. He will destroy them for their sins. I take great comfort in that because I serve a mighty living God who has allowed us to go through this season of discomfort because we as a nation had turned our backs on him and we need to get right. So I am just going to thank you so much. I'm going to say God bless you